Now, a non-binary person is set to appear at the High Court to campaign for a UK gender recognition certificate.
So what's their aim? Their aim is to appeal a ruling made by the Gender Recognition Panel not to grant them a gender recognition certificate. So in other words, they say, we're non-binary. The panel come back and say, well, you can't be non-binary. You've got to be a man or a woman, I presume.
So we're asking the question this morning, should non-binary be legally recognised as a gender?
Joined by former British swimmer Sharron Davies. We say good morning to Sharron, who thinks it shouldn't, while author and broadcaster Amy Nickell-Turner believes that it should. So I wonder, Sharron, how common this problem is.
Oh, gosh, I mean, that's a question I can't answer for you. What I can tell you is that I believe in biology. And obviously things like medicine, sport, statistics, which actually influences policy, is based on biological sex. And human beings can only be male or female. Even people with the DSD, difference of sexual development, are still male and female. There is no third sex. So I think what we've kind of done, we've gone down a rabbit hole of having to create so many different labels for really just different types of personality. I mean, I was around in the 70s, the 80s and the 90s when we had Boy George, Marilyn, Annie Lennox, David Bowie. You know, these are people that didn't conform to stereotypes. And it's stereotypes, really. It's not biological sex. It's whether you're feminine, today's version of what you think feminine is, or what you think you are today's version of masculine. And I'm saying that's just numerous. You know, it's numerous personalities. That doesn't change your biological sex. So for things like medicine, sport and statistics,
so
we need to be honest.
You think that some of the people you named there, whether they were man or woman, if they had tendencies for another sex, that was okay, but they still... You know, so whether Boy George would have to say, I am a man, but I might have feminine tendencies.
I suppose we get really bogged down with these man, male, female. I always refer to the terms male and female as a description of biological sex. So I would say that Boy George was male. David Bowie was male. Annie Lennox was female. However, if Annie Lennox wanted to wear suits and have short hair, that didn't all of a sudden make her a man. You know, it just meant that she liked to dress in a masculine way. That's absolutely fine.
This is about people not wanting to be a man, per se, as a woman. It's about being neither, about somebody being non-binary. Let's bring in Amy Nickell-Turner in all of this. I mean, there are 30,000 people in the last census that say they are non-binary. Do we just ignore them?
So I think what Sharron's done there is she's presented a common misconception about non-binary people, and she's described gender expression. David Bowie and Annie Lennox had an androgynous gender expression. That's nothing to do with your gender identity. Sharron then talked about biological sex. Again, no one is denying biological sex. A very simple analogy to understand the difference between biological sex and gender identity is to think of biological sex as the computer hardware and then gender identity as the software. They're two completely different things, but they're equally valid and equally immutable. And non-binary people currently, they cannot. This is just about their identification. They want to be recognised as they are on their passports, on their driving licenses. There's been examples of when non-binary people have got married and they haven't been able to get married because they would have to use gendered terms such as husband and wife, which doesn't accurately reflect their gender identity. Yes, you can think of biological sex as pink and blue, but then your gender identity is more of a spectrum, and that's a rainbow of colours. So it's not as simple and straightforward, and it's diverse and it's complex. And if you deny that non-binary gender identity exists, which would be pretty silly because it's existed throughout history, particularly in Native American culture. Sharron, I'd love to know what you find funny about that.
I just don't understand how you can say it's existed. We've now got people coming out saying that, you know, Joan of Arc actually identified as being a man, you know, because she was a warrior. I mean, this is just ridiculous. We don't know that, Amy. We don't know that. We're making speculation. All I'm saying is on a passport, for example, we should say whether you're male or female.
We do know that. because we've seen it like two-spirit culture. It's happened throughout time. Also, we lag behind in recognising non-binary in a legal setting. So we lag behind Canada, Germany, Australia, Nepal, India. The list goes on. And at the moment, what we're doing with a lack of education and a lack of advocacy, because there's so few non-binary people, we don't understand them, and we just we repeat these common misconceptions. You've basically ticked them all off. It's just a phase. It's to do with gender expression. It's to do with masculinity, femininity. It's none of those things. It's a gender identity that deserves to have the recognition in the same way your gender identity does and my gender identity.
I'm not really clear what this certificate does. I mean, they're already recognised and identify as non-binary. What difference does it make to have a certificate? Why does this have to go all the way to the High Court, use court time, prompt this sort of national debate?
Because they're keen to point out they're neither man or woman.
But why does it need a certificate to say that? I'm just asking the question.
The simple way to think of it would be, how would you feel, Isabel, if your passport had to say M on it?
So this will go in their passport, is my point. This goes in their passport.
Passport, death certificate, any sort of legal identification. When it really comes to fore is when you want to get married, I think is one that's easy to understand. So would you want to get married, being called someone's husband throughout?
Hang on, sorry, Sharron, you were trying to say something there.
Yeah, so I'm just saying your passport is actually saying whether you're male or female, which is correct. Okay, so it's a biological thing that's saying you're male. So if you were, for example, to go into a coma and then you got rushed into hospital, they would need to know whether you're male or female, because they need to know how to treat you. And it's the same in sport. We just recently had the Boston Marathon, and we had the men's category, the women's category, which had men that were identifying as women, and we had the non-binary category, which were men, again, that were winning. And the guy that won the men's category, who identifies as non-binary, couldn't even make the top 100 in the men's category, and yet he had prize money.
You have a tendency to always bring this subject back to sport, which is obvious. I know it's something that is your area, but we are
one at a time, because the audio isn't fantastic. Apologies, ladies. So, Amy, you make your point, and Sharron, you can respond afterwards.
We aren't talking about sport. We're talking about basic decency and dignity of people to be able to say who they are on their identification documents. This is recognised by the Royal College of Psychiatrists, the World Health Organization, the UN have even pointed out that we are lagging behind in this area of not recognising non-binary identities. We're not going anywhere.
Yeah,
there's only 30,000 of them.
Let's get Sharon's response.
Amy, the women's policy leader for the UN is run by someone who's from Iran. So I'm not sure that I'm going to take an awful lot of notice of what the UN is actually doing at the moment. So my point is that biology actually really matters, and it matters in science, it matters in medicine, it matters in sport, and it matters very much in statistics, because policies are based on that. So,
I'm not denying the relevant importance of biological sex. I'm just saying you should also treat gender identity with the same amount of recognition that you do with biological sex. The two are equally valid, equally immutable, and that's what I'm saying.